But we start with what I think is a unique accomplishment, a grotesquely unique accomplishment by the Biden administration, which has turned the worst day in American history into something even worse. The attacks on innocent civilians on 9/11, to me, is the worst day in American history, because it is the day where we were jarred from our belief that we were immune from the kind of terrorist acts that happen around the world. We found out that day in horrific fashion as 3,000 everyday Americans who went to work or who went about their business, flying to a business appointment or to a leisure appointment or just minding their own business. Ordinary, everyday Americans, not military soldiers who signed up and knew that their signature on an enlistment form might lead to their death in battle, but just moms, dads, children, grandparents, and others going about their business, not bothering anyone, were murdered by terrorists. 3 of those terrorists have been in Guantanamo Bay since being arrested for their role in the 9/11 attacks. And all 3 of them were given yesterday by the Biden administration a plea deal, which will allow them to avoid the death penalty for their crimes. All 3 of them. Now, the deaths suffered on 9/11 were just the beginning of the carnage inflicted upon America by those terrorists. I have talked before about a friend of mine who went to New York City in his role as a journalist, a photojournalist, to capture the events of that day. He was an amazing patriot. He died of 9/11 related cancer. Many people did. Many of the NYPD officers, many of the NYFD firefighters did. If they didn't die on 9/11, a lot of them died later on. You never lose the pain of that day. We commemorate that day in our country. We should commemorate that day in our country. We should never forget it. We have a 9/11 memorial that honors the victims of that day. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Merrick Garland, the Justice Department dishonored, betrayed the families of those victims yesterday with this plea deal. Mitch McConnell, Republican senator from Kentucky, the Senate Minority Leader, called the move to allow Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Walid Mohammed Salih Mubarak, who cares what their names are, 3 of them. Mitch McConnell called it a revolting abdication of the government's responsibility to defend America and provide justice. He's absolutely right. He went on. He said, the Biden-Harris administration's weakness in the face of sworn enemies of the American people apparently knows no bounds. He's absolutely right on that, too. The only thing worse, McConnell said, than negotiating with terrorists is negotiating with them after they are in custody. The families of their victims and the American people deserve real justice, and they do not get it, of course, from this plea deal. And he goes on to note that the Biden and Harris administration, just like the Obama administration, and remember, Obama promised to close Guantanamo Bay, where we keep these animals who exact death, vengeance, and believe it is their lifelong mission to carry out jihad against infidels. Obama wanted to close Gitmo in the first week of his first term of his presidency. He promised to do that. Thankfully, he was unable to ever get it done. But don't discount Joe Biden in his final 6 months of office trying to get it done again. McConnell wrapped up his statement by saying, this administration's cowardice in the face of terror is a national disgrace. And he is absolutely correct on that. House Speaker Mike Johnson, 23 years ago, America watched in horror as thousands of innocent Americans died. America mourned for weeks afterward as first responders sifted through the ashes at Ground Zero, the Pentagon, and at the crash site in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. For more than 2 decades, the families of those murdered by these terrorists have waited for justice. This plea deal is a slap in the face to those families who deserve better from the Biden and Harris administration. It is not a coincidence that this weakness is proliferated beyond 9/11. It is not like, oh, that's a case we'd like to get rid of. We'd like to forget that day. We'd like to move on. No. Remember me telling you a couple months ago about the 2 guys who tried to force their way onto a Marine base in Quantico, Virginia? Hassan Youssef Hamdan and Mohammed Kahar Dabous. Would you have been surprised if I told you they were the 2 terrorists imprisoned with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed? No, of course you would not. Because there is a certain sameness to all these terrorists. There's certainly a sameness in their motivation for their hatred toward America. Both of them crossed into our country illegally in April. And what do you know? Shortly thereafter, they were trying to get onto a military base in Quantico, Virginia that houses the FBI Academy, the FBI Lab, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. Marine Corps Command, which includes supervision over a little thing called Marine One, the presidential helicopter. What bad could happen letting 2 illegals come across the border and get access to Marine One? Gee, I don't know. Can you envision a scenario where they might want to do something? Whatever happened to these 2 guys? Well, they yesterday were released from Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention despite being in the country illegally. Man, how many millions of dollars in bail did they have to post, Bruce? $15,000 for one of them and $10,000 for the other. $25,000, chump change to well-funded terrorist organizations around the world, of which there are scores. They have been released, but they were given a court date. I'm sure they'll come back, maybe in a big truck packed with fertilizer and explosives. This administration is such a disaster, does not care about the safety of American citizens, does not care about the safety of citizens of our allies like Israel, prattles on and pontificates about its accomplishments with NATO, while making the world a more dangerous place every hour